Welcome to the last video for CIS 101, where we're going to be talking about getting input from files. So first we'll talk about how to open and read files, then how to remove the extra new lines in files, and then how to read comma-separated files or files that are made from Excel exports. And finally we'll talk about, give you some tips for your homework. So I created a simple function here that just takes in one input or one argument, and it will just print out that that's the file name that it wants to open. And you can see down here I'm calling that function, and the file is going to be input.txt. So we'll just run that. I saved my file on the desktop, and so we'll run that. And we can see that it prints out welcome to the file input, and then it calls my function saying that I'll open that file name. Now it's pretty common to want to run our program on lots of different input files. That kind of makes sense to use our arguments or our command line arguments to get our file name in here. So maybe first we should check to make sure that they have a file name on the command line right here. And if they don't, we'll exit right there. And then instead of taking in a string for text, we'll just take in the first command line argument and have that be the file name. So now we could see if we run this without a file name, it tells us, hey, you got to include this is how you run your program. And so next we should put our input.txt file right at the end, and now we can see that it's going to open the file that we tell it to on the command line. So now we need a file to be able to open, so I'll just go up here and create a new file, and make sure you just save this wherever in the same folder as your program file, or if you know a little bit more, you can do the full path of where the file is located, and that would be what you include as your file name. But since I'm saving these both in the same folder, I could just put the file name of both of those. So we'll save this, and we'll call this input.txt. Now txt is an extension saying that the file is saved in plain text, is what a lot of people save. And that means just basic ASCII code or Unicode 8. And so you can see down here, Visual Studio Code, it has the encoding right here saying this is just Unicode 8, which is very similar to ASCII. And now we can just fill in our file with some information like, hello, this is text from a file. We could have more lines too. And one more line. So make sure we save that, and again in the same folder. So now what we need to do in our program is open that file, and that's just one simple function called open, and you include the file name right in as the parameter. Now if it can't find this file, when it tries to open it, it will throw an error, but if it's able to find it, then it will open it up. And then we can simply go for each line in our file, like that, and we'll just print out the line. So we should be able to see what's in this file. When we run our program, we should see this come out there as it prints it out. So let's try that. And you can see we have hello, this is text from a file, more lines in the file, and one more line. So that's almost exactly what we have in our file, but if you notice there's an extra line in between each one of those. So why is there an extra line there? Well, when we read this in, there's actually a new line character at the end of this line. And print, by default, also puts a new line character, so you combine those two together, you got the new line that we read out of the file, plus an extra blank line that print does, and that's why we end up with 2. So if we want to get rid of that, we can just say line equals line dot rstrip, and this removes the extra new line. So if we run that, we see that now that extra blank line is now gone. Now, a lot of reasons why we read input from a file is because there's a lot of data and we want to process that data or do something with it. And that's a very common thing that someone would write a Python program for. And so in Excel, if you have an Excel spreadsheet, you can export the spreadsheet into a CSV, which stands for comma separated version. And it has a comma in between each cell like that. Now I just went ahead and typed this up into created a new file and typed this in. But we could also have Excel generate this. And I'm going to pretend like these are grades. So I have 3 students, and these are the grades that they got on 3 different assignments. And maybe we want a total number of points for each student. So let's work on that. So I added to my function a split command that splits based on a comma. So that means it's going to take the line that we read in and divide it into each part with the comma being the separator, and we'll just print that out. And now I'm going to run this, and I've changed my input file. That this was a text input file. I changed this to be a .csv, my CSV input file there. So when I run it, you can see that I have the data now in an array for each student. And now I can just simply add up the parts. So I can say the total points equals parts sub 1 plus parts sub 2 plus parts sub 3. And again, 0 would be the name, and then 1, 2, and 3 are their different grades. Now the only thing is, these are strings from a file, so we have to turn them into integers. So by putting them in this int with the parentheses surrounding it on both sides, so we do that for each one, and then we can add them all up together. And then I just print out, and again, part sub 0 is the name. And then I put a colon and a space, and then we can see the total points right there. So let's try this out. Total points is also a number right here, so we have to turn this into a string to make it work. And now we can see Fred got 90 points, Bob 100, and Mary got 90 points. So this could be a very common thing that you would do with comma separated files. Now your homework won't be too bad. You won't have to do any of this right here, so I just want to show that to you in case you went on and want to use Python to process some data. But in your homework, you just need to count certain things in a file, like how many letters there are and how many capital letters there are, how many lines there are. So for each thing that you need to count, just set up an initial thing. So I'll do the lines for you. So there are 0 lines, and you might want to make sure you use something different than this right here. Of course, lines is different, but this makes it a lot different. And so then we can just add up. Add 1 for each line we get. Now if we get a line, if you remember from the strings, we can just add another for loop and go through each character, and then you can test to see if the character is a vowel or a consonant or whatever else that you need to test for. So at the end, after we've gone through every line, we'll just print out our results. Making sure that we turn our numbers back into strings so we can concatenate them together. And we can see that there are 3 lines in this file. Another thing that we can do with the print is just separate these by comma, and then we don't have to convert the numbers to strings, it'll be happy to print that out for us, just like that. So that's all you need to know for files for this class. So good luck on the homework,